Hey, 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 happy Thursday. Tonight, I am going to page through and review the Swords and Wizardry edition of City of Brass from Frog God Games. So pull up a chair, take a load off. The Daily Dope is in the air. Wow, I am way off. It's like, come on in, pull up a chair. The Daily Dope is in the air. There's a bug flying around over here. It's distracting me to no end. Howdy, 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 gang. Yes, I'm Jeff McAleer, back once again as your host here at the Daily Dope. Yes, there is another ladybug flying around down here in the Duct Tape Studios, and it is like flying and pinging up against one of my lights. So it's kind of like, all right, cut it out. It's like ding, ding. So I'm trying to start the show off. I'm like, hey, what can I tell you? It's a live stream. So welcome aboard. Tonight is Thursday, April 23rd, 2020. This is episode 476 of the Daily Dope. I do want to point out, if this is the first time visiting with me, this is very, very casual. This is not rocket surgery by any stretch of the imagination. Oh, there's the bug again. It's inside. That's the problem. It's inside the fabric. So after the show, I'll have to knock it out. Not gonna kill it. Just gonna knock it out. It is a ladybug after all. Anyway, this is a casual show. Normally what I do is I bring you the latest in tabletop gaming news, sometimes a little bit of pop culture as well. But seeing that we've got the pandemic going on right now, gaming news is kind of, a little bits and spurts. I don't get a whole lot of it all at one time. So what I've been doing is sharing some actual play sessions, some first looks, some unboxings, some reviews as well. So as I mentioned, tonight I will actually be reviewing and paging through City of Brass from Frog God Games. Of course, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you do. Click on that little bell, because it will not only notify you when the Daily Dope streams live Monday through Thursday nights right here on YouTube, it'll also let you know when I upload standalone videos as well. Just like my recent almost 3-hour video of our live play of The Haunting for Call of Cthulhu. We were playing remotely barely using Fantasy Grounds, I guess I'll say. And of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit gaminggang.com for all the latest in gaming news, reviews, comics, movies, TV. Get your geek on at gaminggang.com. Because this is a live stream, that does mean that chat is available on YouTube. It's not on screen. It's one of the ways that I keep some of the more unusual commenters at bay. But I do my best to pay attention to chat. So if you'd like to say howdy, or maybe you've got a question, comment, fire away. I will do my best to respond. Sometimes when we have quite a few people in chat, things kind of zip past me. So if it's something that, is crucial, you'd like to get it answered to, or you'd like to point out, you may have to post twice. Anyway, so far tonight, we've got Dan from No Enemies here, as well as the Madman are hanging out tonight in chat. So as I mentioned in the open, along with completely losing my chain of thoughts, I am going to be paging through and taking a look at City of Brass, which is for Swords and Wizardry. There is a 5th edition version of this as well. I will be reviewing the book also. This is from Frog God Games. The 432-page PDF is available at DriveThruRPG for $25. The hardcover and PDF are available through Frog God Games. normally carries an MSRP of $100. Right now, they are on sale. You can get them for $70. So effectively, because Frog God Games says they always include the PDF absolutely free, it's a $70 book. So let's swing on over to the other camera and let's get started. So this is City of Brass. It is written by Casey W. Christopherson with help from a lot of other people. So I'm actually going to zoom in on the credits once we get into the book here, because there are quite a lot of people who are involved in City of Brass. So I'm going to flip this over real quick. Take a look at the back. So it says, upon his brazen throne, the Sultan awaits. The City of Brass, legendary capital of the Afridi Empire and jewel of the Genie nations, sits upon a multi-dimensional vortex at the edge of the elemental plane of fire. From here, the Sultan sends his mighty armies across the cosmos, bringing fire and destruction to the known planes. Now the kingdoms of the Lost Lands are in his sights, and the Sultan has unleashed the call to the Burning One. Brave heroes must rise to the challenge and do the unthinkable. Take the battle to the City of Brass itself and end the Sultan's threats once and for all. All right, so we're going to jump on in here. Actually, I misspoke. It's 440 pages. I don't know why I was thinking it was 432. Let's pop on in. And I am going to zoom on in here real quick so we can get a better look at everybody who was involved in this. So we've got the authors, additional materials, so on and so forth, the different artists. So wanted to make sure that I give a special shout out to those folks as well. As Dan from No Enemies here is saying, I love ladybugs. All right, zoomed out a little too far. There we go. That should be good. It's like, so one thing I do want to point out, if you look at the cover, if you are not overly familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, and we're talking the TSR years, first edition, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, the Dungeon Master's Guide. This is an homage to the cover of that, because the City of Brass is actually on the cover. So the Afridi is from the City of Brass on the cover of the original Dungeon Master's Guide, which, what was that, 1979 that came out? City of Brass has been covered from TSR products in the past, not in a great deal of depth, to be honest. There is even a City of Brass first person kind of, I don't want to say shooter because you're really not shooting, but there's a first person perspective game for PC as well called City of Brass, and it does have a Middle Eastern Arabian Nights kind of vibe. So did want to mention the City of Brass is not some new concoction, but this book does really delve into, I'm going to zoom out a little bit more. Let's zoom it in, Jeff. There you go. That's zooming on out as my finger is there. So we can try to get all of the book in the shot here. There's a lot going on here. This book is really essentially broken up into 3 books. The first book, and I am going to keep this as spoiler-free as I possibly can, because this is a big campaign. This is something along the lines of, which I play a lot of, called Cthulhu, Masks of Nyarlathotep. That is something that immediately comes to mind when I'm talking about a massive ongoing campaign that would take months, if not years, depending on how often you play and how long your sessions are, in order to complete. So there's a lot going on here. So the first book is really going to start giving you some information about the City of Brass. This is actually set in the Frog God Games home setting of the Lost Lands. So that's where Bard's Gate and Rapin Athuk, I think that's how it's pronounced. Those big, massive adventures. Rampant Athuk is actually a mega dungeon, but that's the setting. You can put this in any setting you want because although it starts off kind of in a traditional fantasy sort of setting, you are going to move on to the city of Brass, which is on a completely different plane of existence. For those of you out there who might be wondering, as far as the original Necromancer Games release, it was a box set, I do believe, with 3 books. This does build on that. It has, I believe, 150,000 new words and added to this. So this is not just kind of a little bit of a revamp or kind of a polishing up. This is vastly different, I would guess, than the box set that came out a few years ago. This actually kickstarted last year. We get a little bit of background about the city. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more up front. I have mixed emotions with this book, which I will get to when I talk about my review. There are some things that I love about this book, and there are other aspects of it where I'm sort of like, kind of surprised they went in that direction. Let me grab a quick sip here. So the first book essentially is the first part of the campaign, the first adventures of the campaign. So these are going to take beginning characters from first level, and remember, this is Swords and Wizardry, not 5e, although this is easily ported over to, say, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons or original Dungeons and Dragons if you want, because Swords and Wizardry is built off of OD&D. So the first section is, the first book is essentially the adventures that are going to take the characters from first level up to 10th level. The second book is essentially talking about the various different factions that are going to come into play as far as the adventure itself. That's the main portion of the second book. Then the third book is pretty much back to focusing almost exclusively on the adventures in the campaign. You see, Flaming Heron's joined us in chat. So thanks for joining us, Flaming Heron, who mentions really interested in this as I'm really getting into Swords and Wizardry. If you saw my review for the core book for Swords and Wizardry, and I'm pretty sure Flaming Heron probably did, I really thought it was great. I thought it was really, really well put together. Exceptionally well put together, to be honest. And I didn't, honestly, when I first did my interview with Matt Finch, who is the author of Swords and Wizardry, I thought it was more kind of a takeoff of BX D&D, but it's actually OD&D, which I like better. I like the race and class being separate as opposed to being this, tied together. Like, oh, I'm an elf, so that's your class. Not a big fan of that. As you can see, we've got some really nice maps. We've got some cool cartography throughout. One aspect of the book as well is you're going to see these kind of side boxes, which are very interesting because they pretty much provide the dungeon master, game master, what have you, with some additional information, some little kind of helpful tips, I guess I'll say. So once again, we have a city map. So what'll happen is the characters are going to find themselves traversing a good deal of the Lost Lands before they find themselves traveling onto the city of Brass. And as I mentioned, once they finish up these adventures, they will end up being probably about 10th or 11th level here. So what are the aspects of the book that I was a little disappointed in is that there is a lot of information for you to have to process in order to run this. This book is not necessarily well structured to be useful right at the table. I know a lot of people out there, they like especially old school Renaissance role-playing games where it's just boom, I can just drop it down and kind of, I've read through the adventure once and now I can go to town with it because everything's kind of laid out where I need it to be. And you tend to have much more terse descriptions. You don't have a lot of background information. That's not necessarily the case here. There is a lot of info. I don't want to say it's a complete info dump on you because that's not it. But one aspect is you really kind of have to read through this whole thing to understand the story. I happen to be a big fan of the style that Chaosium has had for decades with their Call of Cthulhu adventures, where the keeper, the first thing they read about is, okay, this is what this story is all about. This is what's maybe going to happen. This is what's happened before. And you pretty much have all the major plot points in front of you before you even dive into the adventure. I like that a lot. I even have noticed that 5th edition, their adventures have started to go in that direction as well, where you open up the book and it's already getting into, okay, so this is what's going on. And then as you dive into the adventure, then you get into the nitty gritty as well. So I was a little surprised by that. But what's in here is really, really well done. This is a very, very cool campaign to run. Like I said, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be the easiest thing for somebody to run, simply because you don't have, I don't want to say hand-holding, because hand-holding sounds negative. You don't have the, I don't know, just kind of the support that you would like to be able to just understand, okay, this is what's going on in this adventure, crack it open, and then start running it. So what will eventually happen is, like I said, I'm going to try to keep this pretty spoiler-free, but the player characters eventually end up in a city that's in the midst of a religious war. So that's pretty wild. One aspect I really do think is very, very cool with City of Brass are the various different factions that will come into play. And there is tons and tons of opportunities for really fun role-playing. I will also mention that, unlike many fantasy role-playing adventures, you do have the opportunity, if you want, you can easily be evil characters traveling through the campaign. It can happen. I know a lot of times, personally, I don't run games where the characters are evil. I don't mind shades of gray. That's okay. I'm not necessarily a big fan of alignment in role-playing games. But I'm not interested in running campaigns that feature evil characters, nor do I ever play evil characters. Even when I'm playing, computer role-playing games, I never play an evil character. And if a game kind of makes you play an evil character, I won't play the game. So there you go. All right, so this is the second book. So now we get into the second book here. And the second book is mainly focused on the various different factions. So you've got a big bad who is not necessarily who you think would be the big bad. I know that is sometimes kind of a trope in fantasy role-playing games. In fact, almost any role-playing game where people who are helpful to you and seem to be friendly end up being the ones who are screwing you over in the end. So, but we do have a variety of different factions that are going to actually provide the adventurers with different different adventures, different story hooks, different missions that they can go on. So then we start getting into the Plane of Molten Skies, which is this where the city of Brass resides. And it is a vortex of the plane of fire, plane of earth, and plane of air. And it is an area where you would think, if you went with kind of the sort of background, the history of the city of Brass by way of TSR, you have more of an impression that it would take place on this kind of like plane of flames. But in this, it's not. It's actually kind of a desolate land, but you don't have to really necessarily have any sort of protection from fire in order to survive traveling to the city of Brass. So we've got some areas here we're talking about. Some encounters as you're traveling through. Then we get to the Bazaar of Beggars. So it's like the Bazaar of the Bazaar if you're familiar with Bofford and the Grey Mouser, right? Kind of it's kind of funny because I almost get a Lankmar kind of vibe from the city of Brass, the actual city itself. Although it is kind of set up on 3 different levels. But it's just kind of strange that I kind of get a feeling of a Glankmar. You know, if you're fans of Bofford and the Grey Mouser, Fritz Leiber stories, it's just something about it. Maybe it's just me, but that's just kind of the feel that I've got. Then we start getting into the city of Brass, and the city of Brass is kind of funny because it resides in a brass bowl. So we'll actually have a map, an image. There's some really cool artwork throughout. I really like that. It kind of gives you an idea of, okay, what Comet apartments look like. So we have the upper city. So the upper city is pretty much the Afridi nobility. These are where the movers and shakers of the city are located. We get a discussion of the various different areas and districts of the upper level. Then we'll get into the center, the middle city, which is kind of all like shops and bazaars and things like that. It's all kind of mercantile, where it's focused on mercantile. Flaming Heron says, I don't mind playing bad characters in games, but probably not in RPGs unless everyone was one. I don't like somebody playing an evil character just to be a douche. And Dan's got to rock out. Good to see you, Dan. Have a great weekend. See you next week. Hopefully pop by on Monday to say hello. All the best with your show, my friend. So going through here, kind of getting an idea of the middle city. More cool artwork. As you can see, there is just tons and tons of info in here. We've got hundreds upon hundreds of NPCs. We've got various random tables that we can be rolling on. There you go, for an example right there. Malfunctions in Farm's Emporium, items that you may have bought there. Then we get to the lower city, and the lower city is where kind of the dregs of society reside, the slaves. And there are hundreds of slave races that are actually in the lower city. So one way you could kind of look at it would be, well, if you think about it, over in Scotland, right? So they kind of did that sort of thing. They would have like the upper city and then lower city, and then the lower city was always where the working class or the working poor tended to live. Then we get into book 3, Tales of Brass. So what happens here is now we kind of jump back into the campaign. The previous book is giving us all these different locations. There are tons and tons of adventure nuggets, story nuggets that are located in book 2, but book 2 is mainly giving you background on the factions and the location. Now we jump back into the city itself and adventures that focus in the city. So we get a bit of a prologue. So what'll happen is, I don't think I'm really giving anything away by saying this. So the characters have the opportunity to actually try to overthrow the Sultan. Now there are various factions they can utilize to help them. And I will point out that the City of Brass, a good majority of the people you will run into, the NPCs you run into there, are not going to be good. Not going to be of good alignment. Not to say that there aren't any, but for the most part, you are looking at kind of an evil place. So we start going through some of the adventures here. Once again, we have some cool maps, some cool layout. I have to be honest, I don't know if this is available for virtual tabletops. I don't believe it is. Yeah, just to point that out, I don't think that this is available for virtual tabletops, in case anybody out there is wondering about that. Something I will also point out as I'm paging through is that if you purchase the PDF on DriveThruRPG, it's $25. If you purchase the PDF on Frog God Games' website, it's $49.99. I don't know why there's that large discrepancy. Probably simply because whoever codes the website for Frog God Games didn't even realize it's $25 over at DriveThruRPG. But as you can see here, the book itself, if you're going to purchase the book is going to be $70. That is available from the Frog God Games website, and it does include the PDF. And I know there are folks out there who feel that Frog God Games is pricier than it should be for their releases. And I will admit, $70 for a 440-page hardcover book is a little steep. It's a little steep in my opinion, but this is jam-packed with goodness. If you take a look at the revised edition of Massive Nyarlathotep, I believe that's $80 or $90. That might be $100 for all I know. But I can tell you from personal experience, and when we played Call of Cthulhu back in the day, we played about 3 or 4 times a week, and we would usually play a good 8 to 10 hours, and that still took 6 months for us to complete. And Elliot and Ed and Paul never actually went through all of it. They did not go through every single aspect of the adventure. So when you're looking at something like, say, for an example, this is on sale right now for $70, you are going to get tons and tons of gameplay out of it. So, continuing along. But pretty much you'll notice each chapter is effectively an adventure, at least in books 1 and 3. And you will go take your characters all the way up to level 20. I will point out, as far as the treasure and experience points, for some reason, now maybe it's just me, maybe I don't know, but it seemed kind of light for Swords and Wizardry, because Swords and Wizardry is a system where you're mainly getting your experience points from loot, as opposed to just doing the Monty Hall style of role-playing. Kick in the door, kill everything, take the loot. Yeah, what's behind this door? I don't know. Let's find out. Kick it down. Another aspect of the book that I'll point out is that we do have a good number of images and maps and cartography. Nice artwork, really nicely done. But it is not a situation where you're looking at, wow, man, I feel like I'm being cheated. There's all this artwork. Where's the actual gameable material? Why is this all this fluff? So that is not the case here. Dave Rosser, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. I believe this might be your first time visiting us. What version is this for? This is for Swords and Wizardry. I'm going to take a stab that the 5e edition is almost exactly the same outside of the stat blocks. I will mention that this adventure does have more of an old school revival, old school Renaissance vibe to the goings on than, say, 5th edition or modern style fantasy role-playing games, which I like. I think people who follow the Gaming Gang, who check my videos out and things like that, they know I'm a fan of OSR because that's what I grew up with. But also, I like the backgrounds for characters that take place and be created through playing the game. Not I sat up all night concocting this backstory that now my game master has to try to shoehorn into the game. I mean, I don't mind having a backstory for characters, but we're like, wow, how do you know, especially when I'm running a game, it's like, how am I gonna fit that in? So Dave Rosser says, love the idea of the City of Brass ever since I got there we go, AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide. I know we were talking about that earlier in the video, right at the beginning, how, and we'll go back to the cover as well, how the Ifrit on the cover of the Dungeon Master's Guide and the City of Brass, which is actually, which I remember correctly, that's on the back cover, the way, because it's one piece of artwork just wrapped around. But it even says that it's, you know, the City of Brass. As far as mature themes, anything like that, nothing out of the ordinary. There's nothing here that I wouldn't feel comfortable running, say, a 12 or 13-year-old. I mean, there's some stuff that I'd probably tone down a little bit, but nothing that you're like, oh, holy cow, whoa. Yeah, I don't think we want to run that for the kids. So we're getting close to the finale here, as you're going into the Sultan Court. Let's get a nice look at that artwork there. And then we're going to actually, once the adventure wraps up, we do go into a section. We've got some new monsters. One thing I was a little disappointed in, and if you follow any of my looks at role-playing games, I love to have pictures of the monster. I'm just a big fan of images of the various different monsters. That is not the case, unfortunately. Same as the new magic items, as a Grey Day has popped into chat. Good to see you, Grey Day. We have some new magical items. The magical items are kind of cool. Kind of different. I happen to be one of these people. I'm not a big fan of book magic items, which there are in here. I am not like, oh wow, +1 mace. Oh, that's exciting. I like to have a little more going on with my magic items, which I have to admit, many Swords and Wizardry adventures that I have read, because I've actually read quite a few, just not necessarily from Frog God Games. But I was going to say that Swords and Wizardry tends to kind of, and I guess this is maybe just because it's an OD&D sort of thing, it tends to really bring out a lot more of the interesting magic items you kind of, well, it has a boon and a bane sort of magic item. One adventure that, of course, has nothing to do with this. One adventure I am especially fond of magic item is a sword that can detect if someone's lying. The only problem is if you have the sword, you can't lie. So it's kind of like, So Flaming Heron says, no artwork for the monsters. Named ones were the best part of the older styled games. So then we've got some adventure seeds, 101. If you're curious, this is not necessarily an Arabian Nights style. This does have a Middle Eastern theme to it. It does have a bit of kind of 1001 Nights, but there's a bit of Gonzo to it as well. So, and there's some high adventure aspects to this also. Some kind of almost pulpy, I would say, a little pulp action in here also. So it's not strictly an Arabian sort of campaign. That said, if you are someone who runs older editions of Dungeons and Dragons, and say you're a big fan of maybe possibly like Dark Sun, I could see you fitting this in to something along that as well. So there we have all 440 pages of City of Brass. Let's swing on over to the other camera and we'll give you my final thoughts as well as a review score. Dave is asking, do I also have the PDF? No, I do not. I did not receive the PDF from Frog God Games. They were kind enough to send me City of Brass as well as Swords and Wizardry. So they were kind enough to send me both of these to review. I do not have any of the PDFs. So here's what I would be curious about. So a Great Day says the best piece of art is the cover. The book is really, really, really nicely presented. It really is. There you go. Get another good look at that artwork there. But anyway, to answer the question as far as the PDF, I don't see the question I would have as far as the PDF would be because I uploaded the first part of our live play of The Haunting for Call of Cthulhu, which we did Sunday. I finally got it rendered and everything, got it uploaded yesterday. So I was messing around with Fantasy Grounds without actually having to dive in and learn everything about Fantasy Grounds. So one aspect that I think is pretty cool is that you can plug in images, which I'm sure you can probably do with Roll20. I would take a guess maybe you can do that with D&D Beyond. So with a PDF, it is possible to actually take these maps from the PDF, and of course you're going to have to use Photoshop. You're going to have to create these yourself, but I would think in the PDF you would be able to plug those things in. So I know a lot of people are looking at PDFs a little differently now, especially because so many people are playing remotely or trying to play remotely in the midst of this pandemic. So I'm kind of curious about the PDF as well. So, but no, I did not have an opportunity to get my hands on it. Okay, so my thoughts about City of Brass. I already pointed out that I would have liked to have had the book laid out a little more towards making life easier on the Game Master. It's just, you really kind of have to read the whole thing to get an idea of what the real big arc of the story is. It's not easily digestible in little chunks at a time. So for an example, a lot of times people are like, oh, well, yeah, I'll pick up Persistrad. Or, well, I guess that's probably not a good example. Let's say Storm God's Thunder or whatever, Storm Giant's Thunder. So they can read part of that and, you know, like the first few, like adventures, encounters, and stuff, they can be like, oh yeah, I can run that. Easy. I don't necessarily need to have, the whole thing laid out for me. I can just start, popping things in. Not so much City of Brass. Although, on the other hand, on the flip side of that, you got all these little sidebars, these little side boxes. They have these little helpful bits of information, which are really aimed at the game master as well. So I do like that. I love the actual City of Brass, that whole, that plane of existence, where it's on the vortex of the plane of fire and earth and air, those planes. Really, really dig that. I get a kick out of the city actually is in a brass bowl. I think that's pretty wild. The city itself is very cool. The different factions, they're all vying for power. Really dig that as well. The adventures, all in all, and I mentioned before that they kind of have an OSR vibe to them, as opposed to a sort of modern Pathfinder / 5e sort of kind of like, well, I just roll my skill and okay. No, OSR is you gotta tell the game master, what are you doing, and then we'll figure out if this works or not, or what the odds are of that working. Dave Rosso says, does it work as a sort of setting for say like a campaign that's not focused there, but may go there a lot? Yeah, I could see that. There's lots and lots of info inside the book, especially about the City of Brass, that doesn't necessarily have to be used in the campaign adventures. Plus, one of the appendices is 101 story and adventure seeds. So yeah, you can easily use this as kind of a setting. I would say that we're talking about the setting, the earlier stories, encounters, chapters, we'll say, before the adventurers do get into the bulk of the campaign and they realize, oh, hey, I guess we are gonna be visiting this other plane. I find that setting is a little weaker. But then again, it's probably just because I don't have a lot of background info on the Lost Lands setting that Frog God Games happens to use. So I gotta also say, like I said, really like the adventure, really like the artwork. I do wish there was more artwork as far as the monsters, because there's none. There's no artwork as far as the new magic items either. It's a little weak on the magic items. I would have liked to have seen more magic items in there as well. On the plus side, love the different factions. I love that everybody's kind of, working behind the Sultan to try to take over, or just the Sultan. So lots going on. Really, really enjoyed this. Gotta say, price-wise, for $100, I think it's overpriced for $100. Even though that includes the PDF. For $70 right now over at the Frog God Games website, I think that's a pretty good deal. $25 over on DriveThruRPG, and I'm not just saying this because I'm affiliated with DriveThru, and if you make a purchase, if you go through one of our ads, one of our banner ads over at thegaminggang.com, I get a little piece. This is why I'm saying this, because it's $49.99 for the PDF on the Frog God Games website. It's $25 for the same exact PDF at DriveThruRPG. For $25, it's a steal. It really is. And I am one of these people who always talks about PDFs are getting to be really overpriced. Now with City of Brass, I really, really do like City of Brass. Is it for everybody? No, it's not. For game masters out there who are maybe just starting out, I think they'll be kind of overwhelmed with everything that's in this, but that's not a knock against the book. It's just, there's a lot going on here. And not all of it's always laid right out there. You have to read through everything to go, oh, okay. Now I understand their motivation here. So, I think for experienced game masters, this is really, really well done. I think this is really, really nice. A little overpriced, got a few quibbles about it, but in the end, I do give City of Brass a 9 out of 10. That's how good I think this is. I really, really do like it. And for folks out there like Flaming Huron, kind of getting into the whole Swords and Wizardry side of things, give it a peek. If the $70 book price throws you off, take a look at the PDF. Because there's a lot of other PDFs out there going for $25 that don't have half the gameable info and goodies in here. Hey, Viper Dave is popping in. Viper Dave loves to come in right when we're going to wrap up. So, a Great A says, one thing I love about Dungeon Crawl Classics, I'm sure that's what you mean by DCC, short and to the point modules. Yes, there are some aspects of Dungeon Crawl Classics I think are just a blast. Although I have not played, I have read it. Really dig the magic system. I love how the aspects of the magic system work. Even though it's the same spell, no two characters or NPC and character have the same exact spell, that it's just different. The effects are kind of the same, but the whole presentation, how they have to cast it, you know, the visuals of it are different. I love that. I love the fact that corruption, because yeah, you're not supposed to be really using magic. I like that aspect. So yes, I do like that. I do like some of their like 0 level funnel adventures too. I think those are kind of cool. Although I think I would have kind of a hard time running them, simply because each player is running like 4 or 5 characters, things like that. But yeah, you know, there are some really cool role-playing games out there that maybe, you know, get lost in the shuffle because everybody, and I'm always sharing news about D&D and Pathfinder myself, but there are a lot of good role-playing games out there that I do my best to try to bring more than just the 5e and Pathfinder releases in front of my visitors and my audience. So there you go. All right. So the Madman's talking about how he loves how Savage Worlds handles magic. That I'm not overly familiar with. I have read Savage World. I have read the rule book. I was gonna say, you know what else is a cool role-playing game, fantasy role-playing game that probably doesn't get enough love is Tunnels and Trolls, because it's different. Even when it came out, the mechanics of the system right now, they're fairly modern. So yeah, they were kind of different back then. I know it's a little different as far as running a campaign. That's where I think Tunnels and Trolls kind of falls apart when you start getting into higher level characters, which is sort of a problem everywhere. Except for if you look at, say, like RuneQuest, Call of Cthulhu, games that are based on like basic roleplay, games that don't have a level system. So even like Traveler, for an example, like Traveler, you just get better. All right. So that is it for tonight's show. As I always like to point out, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell, because it will not only notify you when the stream goes live, yes, when the Daily Dope airs Mondays through Thursdays, right here on YouTube, but also tell you when I upload standalone videos as well, such as my upcoming review. I should get it done this weekend of Tiny Town's Fortune. It's gonna be short. It's probably maybe 15 minutes. And again, I talk all the time. For all I know, it'll be a half hour. And of course, if you haven't had a chance, take a peek at the live play of Call of Cthulhu. Not necessarily because it's a good example of a game being run, because it certainly wasn't. There's some distractions and things like that going on for me personally. But you get an idea of how you can play remotely and actually have things look pretty cool. So, A Great A says they have a stack of Tunnels and Trolls and Basic Fantasy right there next to them on the shelf. Pretty cool. Nice. Oh, so the Madman says Savage Worlds is same spells. Every character comes up with their own description of it. Nice. Very cool. Right. Anyway, those of you who were, I should point out, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in gaming news, reviews, comics, movies, TV. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Don't forget, today's Thursday. Free Epic Games. Go to Epic Games Store. It's For the King this week, which is actually a pretty cool game. All right. Those of you who are watching live, thank you very much for keeping me company tonight. And of course, if you watch after the fact, even if you're watching on Memorex, I certainly appreciate you taking time to give this a peek as well. So, of course, no show on Fridays. I will be back on Monday. So, everybody enjoy the rest of your Thursday night / Friday mornings. I will see you next week. And until then, be smart, stay safe. Oh, you're still here. Well, if that's the case, by all means, subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel by clicking right here. And of course, if you want to catch up on past episodes of The Daily Dope, check out this playlist. And if you'd like to see what YouTube's recommending you take a peek at from the channel, just give a click right over here. Of course, I'm Jeff McAleer, and once again, thank you very much for watching.